All right, today we are tearing into a research paper that really challenges a bedrock component of modern deep learning, specifically how we keep transformers stable. The paper is Stronger Normalization-Free Transformers by Chen, Liu, Zhu, Sun, and Liu, and it's making a pretty bold claim.
It is. The mission here is to show you how this research proves that normalization layers, which, we've relied on for years, can not only be replaced but genuinely surpassed. And they do it with a really simple, statistics-free, point-wise function.
The innovation here is something called the Dynamic Erf function, or Derf. It's built on the mathematical error function, but it's augmented with just a few learnable parameters. It gives it flexibility without all that dynamic complexity.
And the results are just immediate and consistent, right across the board. We're talking powerful gains in vision, image generation, speech, even DNA modeling. For instance, with VIT-based image classification, they got a really definitive accuracy boost over LayerNorm. And in image generation, the DIT model saw its quality metric, the FID score, drop significantly with Derf.
But this is a key insight, and for every researcher listening, this is the part you need to hear.
Yeah.
These gains don't come from better fitting. Actually, Derf models often have a higher training loss, the superior results. They come from better generalization. Derf is basically acting as an implicit regularizer. This is a huge deal for stable architecture design. Okay, let's unpack that. Normalization layers, batch norm, LayerNorm, they've been fundamental since, 2015. They regulate activations, stabilize training, speed up convergence. So if they're so essential, why is there this huge push to just get rid of them?
Well, it really boils down to cost and complexity. The core problem is their reliance on activation statistics. They're constantly adjusting based on the mean and variance of whatever is coming in.
And when you say overheads, what does that mean in an engineering sense?
We mean additional memory access, synchronization between GPUs. It's computationally expensive, especially when you're training these massive models. And for some methods like batch norm, training is just notoriously sensitive to batch size. If your settings aren't perfect, performance can drop or the whole thing just becomes unstable.
Right, and stability tied to batch size is just the opposite of what you want for scalable AI.
Yeah.
That constraint is what started this whole normalization-free movement. And if you've been following this space, you'll remember the predecessor here, Dynamic Tanh, or DYT.
Yeah, DYT was the proof of concept. It showed that a simple, predefined S-shaped function could do the job without any dynamic stats. It fulfilled that same recentering and rescaling role of LayerNorm, but it did it deterministically.
So DYT proved a statistics-free approach could match LayerNorm. The question this new research answers is, can we design a function that doesn't just match, but actually surpasses it? And to do that, they had to go deep.
Absolutely. They didn't just, throw functions at the wall to see what stuck. They systematically studied the intrinsic mathematical properties. A function needs to be a stable replacement. They really isolated 4 fundamental characteristics that govern how this all works inside a deep transformer.
So what are these design principles? This is the checklist we as engineers need if we want to build our own normalization replacements.
Okay, the first principle is zero-centeredness. It just means the function's outputs are balanced symmetrically around zero.
But why does being centered matter so much when the activations themselves can be, all over the map?
Because that's what normalization layers do inherently. They recenter everything. It stabilizes gradients, helps the signal flow smoothly, and stops these internal covariate shifts from messing up the training. And their experiments showed just how strict this is. Even tiny horizontal or vertical shifts in the function center started to degrade performance. If you shifted it too far, like by a magnitude of 2, training just failed. Every time.
That's fascinating. So it's not about the dynamic calculation. It's about maintaining that fundamental symmetry. Okay, number 2 is boundedness.
Boundedness. This means the output has to be constrained within a finite range. And this is arguably the most critical property for these really deep networks. It stops variance from accumulating layer over layer, which eventually leads to signal explosion and, the dreaded NAN errors.
But wait, isn't there a risk that by clipping the function, you're actually reducing its power? You're throwing away information from the tails of the distribution.
Yeah.
Why didn't that hurt performance?
That's a great point. And you are sacrificing some fitting capacity, in theory. But the stability you gain is just so much more important. They found that taking an unbounded function like hyperbolic arcsin and just clipping it consistently led to better optimization and better final performance. The risk of variance explosion is just a much bigger danger.
So stability over maximal representation. And you mentioned functions that grew too fast, like linear. cause divergence. Is there an acceptable growth rate then?
Precisely. They identified a sort of upper limit. If it behaves too much like a line or a power function, it just can't dampen the variance enough and the optimization fails. So boundedness is pretty much a must-have.
Okay, moving on to number 3, center sensitivity. This is about the slope of the function right around 0, where most of the activations are anyway.
Yeah, and high center sensitivity is absolutely vital. If the function is too flat near the origin, all those small but important signals just get lost. They get attenuated. That means slow convergence or just poor performance overall.
So the slope around 0 is like the throughput for small signals. How do they test that?
They systematically introduced a flat region right around the origin of these functions, and the results were unambiguous. The best performance was when that flat region was 0, maximum sensitivity. The moment they started flattening it, performance dropped. If the region got too big, training just diverged. You need the function to be highly reactive right near the center.
And that brings us to the 4th pillar, monotonicity.
Monotonicity. Basically, it ensures that as the input goes up, the output consistently goes up or consistently goes down. It preserves the relative order of the activations.
I'd imagine non-monotonic functions would be a nightmare for stability. Flipping gradient signals, creating weird local optimas.
They are. The experiments totally confirm this. Monotonically increasing functions like Erf worked fine. Monotonically decreasing ones also trained stably. But when they tested things like hump-shaped functions or an oscillatory one like sine, they consistently performed way worse. Just a clear drop in final accuracy.
So we have a very specific profile. Near zero-centered, bounded, sensitive in the middle, and monotonic. A very well-behaved S-curve. And guided by these 4 principles, they did this huge empirical search, which led them to the star of the show, Dynamic Erf, or Derf.
Right. And Derf is defined by taking the classic error function, Erf of x, and just augmenting it with a few learnable parameters to give it some adaptability.
Why the error function specifically?
Because the error function, which is basically the rescaled Gaussian cumulative distribution, it just naturally satisfies all 4 of those properties perfectly. It's bounded, symmetric, sensitive, and monotonic. It's like the perfect mathematical foundation for this job.
And the dynamic part comes from those learnable parameters. Can you walk us through what they actually do, in a functional sense?
Of course. So there are 4 parameters. You have 2 that manage the core shape. One scales the steepness of the curve, that's alpha, and another allows for a small horizontal shift, which is A-lay. Then you have the standard per channel affine parameters, gamma and beta, which people will recognize from LayerNorm. By initializing these in a smart way, they give Derf enough flexibility without ever needing to calculate batch sats.
And deployment is just a clean surgical replacement. You just swap out all the normalization layers and the whole transformer pre-attention, pre-FFN, final norm with Derf. It's a true drop-in, but one that's designed to be architecturally better. And this is where the paper really shines. Derf wasn't just tested on one little vision task. They showed it was robust across pretty much every major AI domain today. Vision, generation, speech, even DNA sequencing.
The consistency is what's so compelling. It really suggests this is a fundamental improvement, not just a one-off fluke. So let's start with vision transformers, or VIT.
Right, and we've seen other norm-free methods kind of struggle to scale in complex vision models. Did Derf hold up?
It did. On VIT-based classification, they saw a solid 0.5% jump in accuracy over LayerNorm. And when they went up to the VT large model, the gain was even bigger, a 0.7% increase. For models of that size, getting that much performance just by swapping one component is a really big deal.
So we have image generation with diffusion transformers, DIT, which are state-of-the-art. Here we're looking at the FID score, so lower is better.
And the improvements here were massive. On the DITL4 model, the FID dropped by almost 2 full points. That's huge. Even on the giant DITXL2 model, Derf still gave a clear 1-point improvement. It really suggests that the signal stability from Derf translates directly into higher quality, sharper images.
What about for people working in sequence modeling outside of language? I see they look at speech and DNA.
Correct. For speech, using Wave2Vec 2.0, Derf consistently got lower validation loss than both LayerNorm and its predecessor, DYT. And in genomic sequencing, where stability is everything because of the huge context windows, they tested models like Caduceus. Caduceus uses RMSNorm by default, but swapping to Derf still gave a clear accuracy gain.
And even in a standard GPT-2 model, Derf matched LayerNorm's performance while beating DYT.
And this point is important. It wasn't just about beating LayerNorm. They compared it against other standards like RMSNorm and GroupNorm LayerNorm, and Derf still came out on top. It proves its superiority over normalization as a whole class of methods, not just one specific type.
Okay, now this is the deep insight that makes this paper so interesting. Derf gives better results, but why? Is it just a better optimization tool? Does it find a deeper minimum in the loss?
The data actually suggests the complete opposite, which kind of challenges a core assumption in deep learning. The authors looked at the training loss after optimization, a measure of how well the model fits the data across all the architectures. And the pattern was identical every single time.
And what was that pattern?
Normalization layers consistently had the lowest training loss, followed by Derf, and then DYT had the highest. So in terms of just fitting the training data, LayerNorm is the best.
So there's the paradox. Normalization gives the best fit to the training data, but Derf gives the best downstream performance. If Derf has a higher training loss but better results, then the improvement has to come from generalization, not fitting.
Exactly. That is the key conclusion. Normalization layers, because they're so dynamic and statistics-based, are incredibly flexible. They can dynamically fit the activation distribution of every single batch. And that's great for crushing the training loss. But in a subtle way, it also encourages overfitting to the quirks of your training data.
And Derf, being a fixed function, doesn't have that problem.
It doesn't. Pointwise functions are constrained by just a few fixed scalar parameters. They apply the same transformation no matter what the batch looks like. This limited adaptability inherently constrains the model's ability to overfit. It acts as a powerful, built-in, implicit regularizer. It forces the model to generalize better.
That's such a fascinating idea. The constraint is the feature. And how does Derf compare to its norm-free competitor, DYT, in this framework?
Derf is the sweet spot. It keeps that strong generalization benefit of being a fixed function, but it has slightly better fitting power, a slightly lower training loss than DYT. It just strikes a better balance between the ability to learn features and the constraints needed to generalize them. That makes it better than both LayerNorm, which is too dynamic, and DYT, which is maybe a little too constrained.
Let's quickly look at the components they introduced in the Derf formula. What about that learnable shift parameter, the Yos value?
The ablation studies confirmed it was crucial. Introducing that learnable scalar shift is consistently improved performance for every function they tested. It just gives the function a little bit of flexibility to optimize its center, which is learned during training.
Did they try making it more complex, like a per-channel vector instead of just one scalar?
They did test that, but the final performance was nearly identical, so they smartly just went with the scalar for simplicity and efficiency. It gives you what you need without adding all the extra overhead.
And finally, they tried to reverse engineer this. Since Derf beat DYT, the Tanh function, so badly, could they just scale Tanh to make it look like the error function?
Yeah, they ran an experiment where they tried to find the optimal scaling factor for Tanh to mimic Erf. And that scaled Tanh did perform a little better than the original, which shows optimization helps, but it still performs significantly worse than the pure error function. It really indicates that the unique mathematical shape of Erf is where the advantage comes from, not just the general S shape. So if you connect this back to the bigger picture, Derf really provides a pathway to building stronger, more robust transformers that rely on deterministic transformations, not batch-to-batch statistics. Its simplicity and its proven strength make it a practical, normalization-free drop-in that engineers should really be testing right now.
So what does this all mean for you, the researcher or engineer out there? It means that normalization layers, the old workhorse, might be officially dethroned by a simple statistics-free function. The era of LayerNorm being a non-negotiable part of a transformer might be ending.
And here's a final provocative thought for you to take away. The finding that better performance correlates with higher training loss. That fundamentally challenges the dogma of loss minimization. We're all taught to just drive training loss as low as possible. This research suggests that in the future, we should maybe be actively looking for simple, statistics-free components like Derf that limit fitting capacity. Could accepting a slightly higher training loss actually be a signal that your model is generalizing better, not a sign of poor optimization? That relationship norm being less than Derf, which is less than DYT on training loss, suggests that designing for limited fitting capacity might be the next frontier in generalization research.